For some must push and some must pull as we go marching up the hill. So merrily on the way we go until we reach the valley, oh.
A man by the name of Claire Bankhead called and asked us to come down as a presidency and make a presentation on Rock Creek. We wrote 3 little books, and we went down and made a presentation to Claire Bankhead about Rock Creek and the second rescue of the Willie and the Martin Handcart companies. We gave him the 3 books. After we gave him the 3 books and the presentation, he shoved them back across the table at us and said, "I don't want these." And I thought to myself, I know we're from Wyoming. You know, it's not that bad. Just 3 guys, you know, from Wyoming. And he said, "Oh, no, it's not that." He said, "I shouldn't have them. President Hinckley should." And I said, "Well, next time you see him, why don't you give them to him?" And he said, "No, you go give them to him right now." And as I remember, I said, "I don't even know where he lives." And he said, "Well, it's over there in that granite building, and I'm going to call his secretary, and you go over there and give it to him." So we went down there and went in the big granite building. And, of course, the security man was there, and he said, "Are you the 3 guys from Wyoming?" We said, "Yeah, we're the 3 guys from Wyoming." He said, "Now you're here to see the president." I said, "No, we're not." I said, "They asked us to give him these books, but we don't want to see President Hinckley." And he said, "I can't believe that. You don't want to see him?" And I said, "It's not that we don't want to see him. He's busy. He doesn't have time to see us. Just give him these 3 books and we'll go back to Wyoming." So we turned around and left, went and had some split pea soup and came home. We also met with the Ogden Temple presidency on the way home and told them what we were doing. And they had to make an enormous amount of adjustments to accommodate this. Because what was going to happen was every member of our stake over the age of 12 was going to have a name of one of the pioneers or their rescuers. That name would be assigned to that person, and they'd go to the temple and do the work. So the Ogden Temple had to set up a whole series of mechanisms to accommodate that, and they were unbelievably kind to us. Those people were prepared to help us to do what we had to do. We came home, and we had scheduled a meeting that was an unusual meeting, and it's not an authorized church meeting, and you can't hold these kind of meetings with the exception of the approval of the area presidency. And what we held was a stake-wide sacrament meeting where the concept of the second rescue was introduced to the Riverton, Wyoming stake. 4 days before the sacrament meeting, President Hinckley called me. It's the first time that he'd ever called. He's called many times since, and it never, ever, ever becomes familiar when one of them call. President Hinckley that day reminded me of Brigham Young. You know, when you read the journals about the Willie and the Martin people coming into the valley, you read that Brigham Young went out to meet the handcarts and the wagons, and that when he saw the children with their feet frozen and their fingers frozen, that Brigham Young wept and said, "Why have they had to suffer so?" That day on the phone, President Hinckley said a lot of things. He wept, and he said, "Why have they had to wait so long?" It had been 135 years since they were here in Wyoming. It was interesting to us that we had just barely passed the time period at that time that you could do work for somebody who was dead that wasn't directly related to you. We received at that time from President Hinckley the authorization to hold the sacrament meeting, and he said if we didn't complete the work, that it would be a sin. He also said, "President Lorimer, don't you stop until this is done, both the temple work and the acquisition of the lands of the Willie and the Martin people." after that phone call, I was kind of loaded up. I mean, the weight was pretty heavy. You know, how do you do all that? How do you acquire the lands? How do you get the temple work done? The only way you can do it is to have an army. And we had one. We held that sacrament meeting. The Ogden Temple Presidency was here. We gave the bishops packets of names and asked them to kneel in prayer with their councils and assign the names of the Willie and the Martin people to their people. The Stake Center the Stake Family History Center was scheduled in half-hour increments starting at 6 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night every day except Sunday and Monday night. You couldn't get in the Family History Center. This stake was completely on fire. We have deacons' quorums to this day who run Temple Ready, who research their own ancestry, process the names, take them to Ogden, and do the temple work. We have 4 quorums in this stake whose quorum presidencies have given the assignment to their quorums. These are Aaronic priesthood quorums of 300 names per quarter of their own ancestry. These kids can do genealogy like nobody's business, and they do it right. The high priests don't stand a chance. We can't do the endowments fast enough. We can't get it done. If you go down to Ogden, you'll see in the Family History File Center, there's little drawers that say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you get to R, and then there's a whole file cabinet that says Riverton, and then it's because of these kids. We can't keep up with them. But the kids and everybody was down at the Family History Center working on family history. It was an unbelievable time. There was such a powerful spirit in our stake. We had many, many general authorities come. I think at first they came to figure out what we were doing. Were we for real, or were we trying to become general authorities, or what were we doing up here? And they came and found out that we weren't doing any of that. We just were trying to do what we were supposed to. The first general authority that came was Elder Tingy. He got here on Friday instead of on Saturday for our conference. He interviewed me until 2 a.m. He knew more about me than I knew about myself when it was over. I told him I'd give him my blood type if he wanted it. We took him out on the trail the next day. He didn't say anything about what we were doing in our conference. We didn't know if he was in agreement or disagreement with us. At the very end of the conference, he told us that he was responsible for a new program. That was one of his responsibilities. It was called Temple Ready. Because before we had to get the discs, send the discs in, they'd send them back. But now there was a new program that you didn't have to do that anymore. He said, I think I can get you one of the first copies of that. But he says, first, we have to prove some things. There were some challenges amongst people. They really did wonder what we were doing up here. Some people just flat didn't believe that that could have happened. One of them was the director of the Family History Department at that time, and I won't tell you his name, but I'll tell you about him. He's a good man. He's a sealer in the Salt Lake Temple. He's a really good man. But he could not believe that the temple work for the Willie and the Martin people was not done. He talked to Elder Tingy before he came up here, told him some things to find out from us. Elder Tingy went back and reported. Elder Tingy called me after meeting with him, and he said, President Lorimer, we want to prove factually what you know intellectually. I said, fine. I said, have whoever call me. It doesn't bother me. So the man called me, and he said, President, I want the names of the 13 people at Rock Creek. I said, okay. I said, have you got a fax machine? He said, yeah. And I said, check it. It's coming right now. I said, I want to prove this so bad. I want you to know what we know. And he said, okay, we're going to put the best people the church has on it. He said, send us all of your research. I said, oh no, that's cheating. You start where we started. You get 13 names. They took the 13 names. They went back to their country of origin and first tried to prove that they were never born. They proved that all 13 had been born. Then they tried to prove that they'd never joined the church. They proved that every one of them did. Then they tried to prove that they never came west in the Willie Handcart company. They proved that everyone did. Then they tried to prove that they didn't die at Rock Creek. They proved unquestionably that every one of them did. Then they tried to understand, after they'd done all that, then they started tackling the temple work. About 4 months went by, and I got a call from Elder Tingey, and he said, President, how's the weather up there? I said, it's good. He said, how's your day? And I said, it's really good. He said, well, it's going to get better. He said, I won't tell you what's going to happen. I just wanted to tell you that your day's going to be better. We parted. Elder Tingey's become a great friend. He'd call me from South Africa from time to time when he was down there, and he still calls from time to time. He was up here last year. This man from the Family History Department called shortly after Elder Tingey, and he said, President Lorimer, we've concluded our research. He said, I want you to know that you were wrong. And I said, well, I'm glad you feel that way, but if you keep working, you'll find out that we were right. And he said, no, I can prove now, factually, that you were wrong. And I said, well, I'm glad that you can, but I still don't believe it. And he said, well, you are. There is one more temple ordinance that needs to be done than you thought there needed to be. And then he became very, very emotional. And he said, President Lorimer, I am so sorry. And I said, sorry for what? He said, I'm so sorry that I couldn't feel this. He said, I'm not a bad man. I said, I know you're not. He said, I'm really sorry that I couldn't feel what the other brethren were feeling and what you felt. And I said, oh heavens, everybody that's ever touched this project has had a purpose. Your purpose was to prove intellectually what we knew spiritually. And then he said, well, I'm glad I could play a part, but it's not a role that I would have selected for myself. Great man. He came to all the dedications. He was a very important part of what happened. So we began the second rescue. Unbelievable experiences happened during our time with the Martin and the Willie people. It was pretty well self-contained in this stake. It didn't go anywhere other than here until October of 1991, which was about, I guess, 7 or 8 months into it. And we had begun to get some phone calls from people because people had heard about it. And so it wasn't unusual to get phone calls. And one day I was sitting at home reading some letters that we'd gotten, and the phone rang. It was Saturday morning. I was sitting in the chair next to the bed, and my wife was still sleeping, and I answered the phone. And I have a terrible time with names. I can't remember people's names. So oft times when I meet people, I'll repeat their name back to them. And so this morning, the guy told me his name, and I said, Del Van Orden, do I know you? And my wife just, she sat up in bed. She got a piece of paper and she wrote on it, and she showed me. She said, that's one of the big guys. Elder Van Orden. I don't know an Elder Van Orden. And then she could see that I was a little perplexed, so she wrote underneath that, he's the editor of the church news. He buys ink by the barrel. And then underneath that, she wrote in great big letters, be nice. So Brother Van Orden started asking me all these questions, and I said, well, you know, that's what we're doing. He was a descendant of one of the Martin people, so he was interested in it from that angle, too. And he said, we want to do a church news article about you guys. And I said, you can't do it. We don't want any church news articles. That's not why we're doing this. We don't want to be in the church news. And he said, well, you know, it'd really help you. And I said, no, it won't help us at all. We don't want to be in the newspaper. And so he gave me about 10 reasons why they ought to do this article in the church news. And I told him no to every one of them. And unbeknownst to me, President Hinckley had just spoken about us in a temple preparation, or a temple president seminar. And President Monson was in the seminar, and he called Brother Van Orden and said, get a story about this. And so finally, after 10 tries, Brother Van Orden says, well, would it make any difference at all to you if President Monson wants a story? And I said, well, if the President wants a story, go ahead and do it. So they wrote a story in October of 1991 about the second rescue of the Willie and the Martin Handcart companies. Unbelievable things started happening. I mean, the phone just didn't quit ringing. Letters just came out of nowhere. It was the most touching thing of the whole thing, though. Since 1991, we received over 7,000 letters. We've tried to answer every one. But we've never, ever received one letter of criticism. Not one. They've all been of encouragement, wanting to know about ancestry, wanting to know about what was happening. Those letters proved invaluable, because with the letters came journals. Thousands and thousands of pages of journals. We have over 60,000 pages of journals of just the Willie and the Martin people. President Hinckley said it's the most complete history in the church. He wants it in Salt Lake, but we haven't given it up yet. And those journals helped us do the family history work. A couple more things about the family history, and then depending on how tired you are, maybe we can show you some things that happened. The family history experience in our stake was unbelievable. There's a piece of paper that I'll show you in a few minutes of a lady in our stake. Her name's Mary Herford. She is a Lamanite, full-blooded Shoshone Indian. And she was given the name in this stake sacrament meeting of Ephraimine Wickland, who was a little 2-year-old girl. They were just pieces of paper, and they had the pioneer's name on it, and then they had the person's name on it that was doing the research, and then any information that we had on them. Sister Herford's home burned down to the ground about 3 weeks after she got this piece of paper. It was a mobile home. Her husband was inactive, wouldn't let her go to church, wouldn't let her go to the Family History Center to do the research on this name, and their home burned down. And when they went back in the home after the fire was put out, laying on the table, a little coffee table or end table, was this piece of paper. And when you look at the piece of paper, you can see the watermarks on it from where they put the fire out. And the paper is just charred. It's brittle. It got so hot. And laying on top of the piece of paper, when you see it, we just have a photograph. President Hinckley did take that and put it in Salt Lake somewhere. It looks like popsicle sticks or fingernail files or something. We're laying on top of that, and one of the popsicle sticks or fingernail files covers up the name Mary Herford, our sister. And another one covered up the name Ephraimine Wickland, the little pioneer girl. So this piece of paper is just charred. But underneath those two sticks, it's brilliant white. Their two names were not burned. Sister Herford came in just shaking, carrying this piece of paper. She says, Brother Laura, I don't know what this little girl needs, but she needs something really bad. And sure enough, little Ephraimine Wickland needed to be sealed to her parents and she hadn't had her endowments. Circumstances, I don't think so. We had a little girl in our stake whose family was given the name of Hosea Stout. He was one of the rescuers to research, and Hosea Stout was a very prominent man in Utah, was a polygamist, and had many descendants. This little girl's family was given Hosea Stout, and they were having trouble finding some of the information. Their half hour was just about up. It was 9:30, and the kids were getting a little squirrely, and they wanted to go home. The father said, "Let me stay for the last few minutes we've got this computer and see if I can find him." And one of the daughters stayed with him. As luck would have it, just 2 minutes after they left, the father and the one daughter found everything. They were excited. They went home cheering and yelling and screaming, telling everybody in the family that they'd found it. There was a little 12-year-old girl who just kind of disappeared. She went in her bedroom. The father and mother went to the door and listened through the door, and the little girl was calling her bishop. And she said, "Bishop, are there any more names?" And he said, "I don't have any, except for one man." She said, "Can I have the man?" The bishop said, "Why?" She said, "I wasn't there. I didn't get to see it. I want to find somebody." So the bishop gave that little girl, 12 years old, the name of James Alfred Peacock, knowing that she could never do one single ordinance for him. That little girl had been given one of the roughest names that we had. She ordered microfilm after microfilm from Salt Lake City, trying to find James Alfred Peacock. She couldn't find him. She knew, though, that the Lord would help her. She wasn't going to give up. She was going to find him, because her stake president had asked her to. Finally, she got a film and found the baptismal record of James Alfred Peacock. Was able to submit his name and let somebody else do it. We had people drive 6 hours one way to do one baptism, and they were thrilled to do it. They were honored to be able to go into the house of the Lord and do some work for a friend that they'd found. It hasn't stopped. Now they're finding their own ancestry, finding their own people. It's been a great blessing to us. I wish we could have stayed in that 4-year period. People were so busy in our stake, they didn't have time to get in trouble. We didn't have one disciplinary council. It wasn't because we weren't holding them and should have been. There just wasn't any to hold.